Chapter 12, Ramachandran introduces us to qualia, but he tends to refer to it in these more concrete perceptual forms like the perception of color. But what I was most interested in are those subjective experiences that are more rich and ambiguous, like love and passion, empathy, and just that feeling of being alive. And the basis of all these things is emotion. And so I decided to research the qualia of emotion. What Ramachandran speaks of most can be referred to as classical qualia, and it's this qualia is elicited by specific external stimuli like smell, color, and sounds. They create these representations in the brain of those external stimuli or our brain's decision that those external stimuli are present. Emotional qualia falls under these same guidelines, but it's the experience of your perception of emotion. It's you feeling your own feelings, and that's available to you through your own introspection. This is a phenomenological representation of the end product of the appraisal process. So there's an emotionally competent stimulus, and there's appraisal process, and then we're urged to this emotion-related reflection, which then ties this meaning to what it is that we're perceiving through our emotions. And this is evolutionarily advantageous, which I'll get into later. Bob Bermond is a professor at the University of Amsterdam, and studying emotion, he came up with two types of emotional qualia that come from two different parts of the brain. The first type is primary qualia, and this derives from the amygdala. And this is your primitive response to emotion. It gives you information about what emotion is at stake, and that information can bypass conscious awareness if the emotionally competent stimulus is threatening enough that the body needs to react immediately. This has no affective experience with this first primary qualia. There's just knowledge of what emotion is happening. The secondary qualia, on the other hand, does have an affective experience, and this happens in the orbital prefrontal cortex. This is the urge, that emotional reflective process, and that can inhibit that primitive response by the amygdala. It projects directly to the hypothalamus and can modulate the activity of the autonomic nervous system if the amygdala activation is mild enough that reflective ruminating process can tell it to stop. The amygdala and the orbital prefrontal cortex have reciprocal connections within the brain. So the limbic system is located right near the orbital prefrontal cortex, and in a diagram, there's even a limbic orbital frontal cortex area that's labeled as them together. What's interesting is that Ramachandran only talks about the cingulate cortex being associated with qualia. However, what Bermond suggests is that when emotion is involved, that emotional qualia has to do with the orbito-prefrontal cortex. The amygdala's involvement with emotional qualia is evident in that even if it's subconscious, there can still be perception of the emotion that is taking place. So something that's shown in people's blind spot, they can still, without being conscious of it, better than chance determine what emotion is being displayed by someone's face. Or if it's subliminal angry faces shown, there's still activation in the amygdala in an fMRI. And individuals with amygdala damage can still experience that emotional intensity, but they lack that ability to determine what emotion is taking place and have that sense of what that emotion feels like. So that takes away, without the amygdala, there's no primary qualia. When it comes to the frontal lobe, if there's a frontal lobotomy or lesion, there's still that emotional knowledge intact, but it lacks affect. There's still a physical response, but that emotional behavior is disinhibited, and it can run wild, and it's only present when the stimulus is present. So it's more like animal behavior, in that there's no reflection or rumination process that we as humans tend to have with that secondary qualia. This is all evolutionarily advantageous. The amygdala is obviously primitive for those survival instincts, determining threat and being able to react appropriately. But the orbito-prefrontal cortex is a more recent development, and it gives significance to those emotional reactions, and it helps us learn from them and plan better and to make better decisions and to know what to pay attention to in our world. And this all helps us adapt our behavior to optimally fit our constantly changing environment. It also helps us form attachments. So when we form that loving, close connectedness with someone, it helps us get our needs fulfilled, especially throughout development. And so that helps with our survival as well. So the purpose of emotional qualia in the end is not just to have these rich and beautiful life experiences, but to help us survive and thrive by bringing that personal significance to our interactions with others and the world around us.